puppy. Oh, I need to mute my computer. There we go. Look at that pup. Oh. Oh. Happy Wednesday. Hello. How's it going? I am feeling slightly rushed. Speed eating some lemongrass chicken just before the stream started. I'm a little weary today. I'm in the middle of, well, not the middle, I'm on the tail end of resetting my sleep. Hopefully successfully. We'll see how tonight goes. It always feels like a gamble. Look at that puppy. What a cute puppy. That's right. Finally, weeks later, today's the 10th. I think it took like 19 or 20 days for the emotes to get approved, but they're all there now, I think. They actually just got approved today. I got an email about it this morning, so. Oh geez, I'm sorry. I might have control over those, but I haven't looked into it, so I never did anything to enable the ads, so I don't know how to disable them, if I can. But yes, hello Sharkies, happy Wednesday. How you doing, pals? Look at this guy. Oh, he's so little. He fit right in my hands. Oh, he's getting bigger. Uh-oh. What, is it because I'm going like this? You were watching me the whole time. You know there's nothing there. Here, there can be. Oh. As far as the emotes go, post dinner and post swimming lesson. Ah, yes. How are the swimming lessons going? Whoa, chompy. As far as the emotes go, I've got like 5 slots that I can use for emotes currently. I probably would get more if we had more followers or something. So right now, I can't actually have any more emotes at once. I could upload a bingo emote and like cycle out one of the current ones, but I couldn't have them all there at the same time, I think. How do you like it? Yeah, I was also rushing a little bit to finish dinner. We took Ben down to the dog park to do a little Books, Brews, and Brews. Hello. Took him to the park to do a little run around, and then came home and was speed eating some lemongrass chicken on vermicelli, and then was kind of like, got 10 minutes to eat, and then gotta get on to stream. So yeah, we've got Angst, Ook, Angst, Ook, Goose, Bard, and Hank. You got a full... That's all I can upload. I might also actually be able to do one animated one. I'm not sure if I can do that or not. I'm not going to be able to figure that out right now, though. How you doing, BBAB? Is it kitty dinner time? That goose mage, yeah. I think that's probably... Is it my favorite? It's probably my favorite. A little wand in its mouth and the wizard hat. The ook almost looks like an Elise. Yes, it does. It does kind of resemble a... what? Frock? Is that right? Honestly, if you don't know what it is, it does kind of just look like a gorilla in a ruff. Yes, ruff. Or an orangutan in a ruff. Oh, puppy. Speaking of rough, puppy got his treats and departed. Feeding the cats and doing the regular nighttime stuff. Yeah, I'm feeling a little sleepy myself. I slept last night, but did not sleep the night before, trying to get my sleep back on track. So hopefully tonight I'll be able to fall asleep bright or nice and early. And yeah, that's the goal anyways. We'll see whether it works. So on that note, I'll probably get an earlier start on the book tonight, huh? So on my copy, we're on chapter 21, page 227. And the previous chapter was largely occupied with a conversation between Calvor of somewhere in Tolnedra and Ambar of Kotu, aka Silk. Screen is still doing that flashy thing. I really don't know what's causing it. It happens on this side, it's happening right now, so you'll see it in there. Which of course is gonna sound weird because I'm gonna... Anyways, yeah, I don't know what's causing that. I'll have to look into that. Computer's been restarted and everything since the last stream, so I don't know why it would be doing that. Oh well. Yeah. So Calvor says it is not worth going into Cthulmurgos right now because you might get executed. You might get accused of a crime you couldn't have possibly committed and then impaled on a stick. I guess he didn't say impaled on what. I'm guessing some kind of stake. Which, you know, not a very nice fate. Of course, that's not going to deter our heroes because they got to do what they got to do. It's just up entirely. Yeah. Anyways. So, don't go into Cthulmurgos. It's dangerous. On that note, let's go into Cthulmurgos. Chapter 21. The South Caravan route wound through a series of high, arid valleys. A series of high, arid valleys. Aren't valleys by definition kind of low? I suppose you could go up and then have the valley go up, and then it would be a high valley. I don't know. I guess high in comparison to what? Not if they're in between even higher mountains. Yeah, I guess so. Maybe if the valley bottom is still high above sea level. Another screen flash. Yeah, maybe that's it. High in comparison to something else. You know what, I think it's another case of the next sentence is going to explain the answer to the question I'm asking. The South Caravan route wound through a series of high, arid valleys that ran in a generally east-west direction. The surrounding peaks were high, higher probably than the mountains to the west, but their upper slopes were only faintly touched with snow. Kind of address. The clouds overhead turned the sky a dirty slate gray, but what moisture they held did not fall on this desiccated wilderness of sand, rock, and scrubby thorn. Though it did not snow, it was nonetheless bitterly cold. The wind blew continually, and its edge was like a knife. They rode east, making good time.
"Belgarath,"
Barak said, back over his shoulder.
"There's a Murgo on that ridge line ahead, just to the south of the track."
"I see him."
"What's he doing?"
"Watching us. He won't do anything as long as we stay on the caravan route." You've lived in weather like that? They always watch like that, Silk stated. The Murgos like to keep a close watch on everybody in their kingdom.
"That Tolnedran, Calvor,"
Barak said.
"Do you think he was exaggerating?"
"No," Belgarath replied. "I'd guess that Taur Urgas is looking for an excuse to close the caravan route and expel all the Westerners from Cthul Murgos." "Why?" Darnik asked. Belgarath shrugged. "The war is coming. Taur Urgas knows that a good number of the merchants who take this route to Rak Goska are spies. He'll be bringing armies up from the south soon, and he'd like to keep their numbers and movements a secret." "What manner of army could be gathered from so bleak and uninhabited a realm?" Mandaralan asked. Belgarath looked around at the high, bleak desert. "This is only the little piece of Cthul Murgos we're permitted to see. It stretches 1,000 leagues or more to the south, and there are cities down there that no Westerner has ever seen. We don't even know their names. Here in the north, the Murgos play a very elaborate game to conceal the real Cthul Murgos." "Is it thy thought, then, that the war will come soon?" "Next summer, perhaps," Belgarath replied. "Possibly the summer following."
"Are we going to be ready?"
Barak asked. "We're going to try to be." It's kind of odd, isn't it? This description, this sort of practical analysis. They're in Cthul Murgos right now. They're not at war, and he's going, next summer, yeah, we will be. Also, the whole, like, we don't even know what Cthul Murgos really looks like. This whole, what we're allowed to see is just a facade, is an odd thought. Like, it feels like they're in stereotypical evil country right now. Everything's bleak and dry. And look at this place, it's uninhabited, but well, that's only because that's what they want us to see. That's interesting. Aunt Pole made a brief sound of disgust. Like Wakanda? Wakanda, you just can't see that it even exists. I guess it's similar in that regard. Secret country. But I guess it's similar. It's as close as you're going to get on Earth, where we've got, planes and satellites and things. Yeah. Aunt Pole made a brief sound of disgust. "What's wrong?" Garion asked her quickly. "Vultures," she said. "Filthy brutes." A dozen heavy-bodied birds were flapping and squawking over something on the ground to one side of the caravan track. "What are they feeding on?" Dernick asked. "I haven't seen any animals of any kind since we left the top of the escarpment." "A horse, probably, or a man," Silk said. "There's nothing else up here." "Would a man be left unburied?" the smith asked. "Only partially," Silk told him. "Sometimes certain brigands decide that the pickings along the caravan route might be easy. The Murgos give them plenty of time to realize how wrong they were." Dernick looked at him questioningly. "Come on, Dernick, you don't want this answer." "The Murgos catch them," Silk explained, "and then they bury them up to the neck and leave them. The vultures have learned that a man in that situation is helpless. Often they get impatient and don't bother to wait for the man to finish dying before they start to eat."
"That's one way to deal with bandits,"
Barak said, almost approvingly.
"Even a Murgo can have a good idea once in a while."
"Unfortunately, Murgos automatically assume that anybody who isn't on the track itself is a bandit." The vultures brazenly continued to feed, refusing to leave their dreadful feast as the party passed, no more than 20 yards from their flapping congregation. Their wings and bodies concealed whatever it was they were feeding on, a fact for which Geryon was profoundly grateful. Whatever it was, however, was not very large. "We should stay quite close to the track when we stop for the night, then," Dernick said, averting his eyes with a shudder. "That's a very good idea, Dernick," Silk agreed. The information the Tolnedran merchant had given them about the makeshift fair at the halfway point proved to be accurate. On the afternoon of the third day, they came over a rise and saw a cluster of tents surrounding a solid stone building, set to one side of the caravan track. The tents looked small in the distance, and they billowed and flapped in the endless wind that swept down the valley. "What do you think?" Silk asked Belgarath.
"It's late," the old man replied. "We're going to have to stop for the night soon anyway, and it would look peculiar if we didn't stop."
Silk nodded.
"We're going to have to try to keep Relg out of sight, though," Belgarath continued. "Nobody's going to believe we're ordinary merchants if they see an Ulgo with us."
Silk thought a moment. "We'll wrap him in a blanket," he suggested, "and tell anybody who asks that he's sick. People stay away from sick men." Belgarath nodded.
"Can you act sick?"
he asked Relg.
"I am sick,"
the Ulgo said without any attempt at humor.
"Is it always this cold up here?"
He sneezed. Aunt Pole pulled her horse over beside his and reached out to put her hand on his forehead.
"Don't touch me!"
Relg cringed away from her hand. "Stop that," she told him. She briefly touched his face and looked at him closely. "He's coming down with a cold, Father," she announced. "As soon as we get settled, I'll give him something for it." "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked the fanatic.
"I will endure what Uld chooses to send me,"
Relg declared.
"It's his punishment for my sins."
"No," she told him flatly. "It has nothing to do with sin or punishment. It's a cold, nothing more." Yep. That could be the next free space for sure. I almost forgot about the bingo sheet. Have we crossed anything off? Should we have crossed anything off? I don't think so. No, I don't think so. Well, don't touch me, emote. Well, as I am learning from how tiny the emotes are, I don't know whether that would be readable. It's a cold, nothing more.
Am I going to die?
Relg asked calmly. Of course not. Haven't you ever had a cold before?
No, I've never been sick in my life.
You won't be able to say that again, Silk said lightly, pulling a blanket out of one of the packs and handing it to him. Wrap this around your shoulders and pull it up over your head. Try to look like you're suffering.
I am,
Relg said, starting to cough. But you have to look like it, Silk told him. Think about sin. That ought to make you look miserable.
I think about sin all the time,
Relg replied, still coughing. I know, Silk said, but try to think about it a little harder. They rode down the hill toward the collection of tents with the dry, icy wind whipping at them as they rode. Very few of the assembled merchants were outside their tents, and those who were moved quickly about their tasks in the biting chill. We should stop by the resupply station first, I suppose, Silk suggested, gesturing toward the square stone buildings squatting among the tents. That would look more natural. Let me handle things.
Silk, you mangy Drasnian thief!
A coarse voice roared from a nearby tent. Silk's eyes, that's interesting, calling him Silk. Silk's eyes widened slightly, and then he grinned. I seem to recognize the squeals of a certain Nadrak hog, he said, loud enough to be heard by the man in the tent. A rangy Nadrak in a belted Nadrak. This is, I think, probably the first Nadrak we've encountered, isn't it? I can't really even think about, details about Nadraks. I'm fairly certain Nadraks are fall under the Angarak umbrella. A rangy Nadrak in a belted, ankle-length black felt overcoat and a snug-fitting fur cap strode out of the tent. Ankle-length black felt overcoat and a snug-fitting fur cap. That sounds cozy. He had coarse black hair and a thin, scraggly beard. His eyes had the peculiar angularity to them that was characteristic of all Angaraks. But unlike the dead eyes of the Murgos, this Nadrak's eyes were alive with a kind of wary friendship.
Haven't they caught you yet, Silk?
He demanded raucously, I think. Raucously. One of those words that I just have never had cause to read out loud before. Maybe once.
I was sure that by now someone would have peeled off your hide.
Drunk as usual, I see. Silk grinned viciously. How many days has it been this time, Yarblek?
Who counts?
The Nadrak laughed, swaying slightly on his feet.
What are you doing in Thul Murgo, Silk? I thought your fat king needed you in Garog Nadrak.
I was getting to be a little too well known on the streets of Yar Nadrak, Silk replied. It was getting to the point that people were avoiding me.
Now I wonder just why that could be,
Yarblek retorted with heavy sarcasm.
You cheat at trade, you switch dice, you make free with other men's wives, and you're a spy. That shouldn't be any reason for men not to admire your good points, whatever they are.
Your sense of humor's as overpowering as ever, Yarblek.
It's my only failing,
the slightly tipsy Nadrak admitted.
Get down off that horse, Silk. Come inside my tent and we'll get drunk together. Bring your friends.
He lurched back inside the tent. An old acquaintance, Silk explained quickly, sliding out of his saddle.
Can he be trusted?
Barak asked suspiciously. Not entirely, but he's all right. He's not a bad fellow, really, for a Nadrak. He'll know everything that's going on, and if he's drunk enough, we might be able to get some useful information out of him.
Get in here, Silk!
Yarblek roared from inside his gray felt tent.
Let's see what he has to say,
Belgarath said. They all dismounted, tied up their horses to a picket line at the side of the Nadrak's tent, and trooped inside. The tent was large, and the floor and walls were covered with thick crimson carpets. An oil lamp hung from the ridgepole, and an iron brazier shimmered out waves of heat. Yarblek was sitting cross-legged on the carpeting at the back of the tent, with a large black keg conveniently beside him. Brazier.
Come in,
he said brusquely.
Close the flap. You're letting out all the heat.
This is Yarblek, Silk said by way of introduction. An adequate merchant and a notorious drunkard. We've known each other for a long time now.
My tent is yours,
Yarblek hiccuped indifferently.
It's not much of a tent, but it's yours anyway. There are cups over there in that pile of things by my saddle. Some of them are even clean. Let's all have a drink.
Brusquely? All the words for me to mess up right now. This is Mistress Pole, Yarblek, Silk introduced her.
Good-looking woman,
Yarblek observed, looking at her boldly.
Forgive me for not getting up, mistress, but I feel a bit giddy at the moment. Probably something I ate.
Of course, she agreed with a dry little smile. A man should always be careful about what he puts in his stomach.
I've made that exact point myself 1,000 times.
He squinted at her as she pulled back her hood and unfastened her cape.
That's a remarkably handsome woman, Silk,
he declared.
I don't suppose you'd care to sell her.
You couldn't afford me, Yarblek, she told him without seeming to take the slightest offense. Yarblek stared at her and then roared with laughter.
By One-Eye's nose, I'd bet that I couldn't at that. And you've probably got a dagger somewhere under your clothes, too. You'd slice open my belly if I tried to steal you, wouldn't you?
Naturally.
What a woman,
Yarblek chortled.
Can you dance, too?
Like you've never seen before, Yarblek, she replied. I could turn your bones to water. Aunt Pole. Yarblek's eyes burned.
After we all get drunk, maybe you'll dance for us.
We'll see, she said with a hint of promise. Garion was stunned at this uncharacteristic boldness. It was obviously the way Yarblek expected a woman to behave, but Garion wondered just when Aunt Pole had learned the customs of the Nadraks so well that she could respond without the slightest hint of embarrassment. This is Mr. Wolf, Silk said, indicating Belgarath.
Never mind names,
Yarblek waved his hand.
I'd just forget them anyway.
He did, however, look rather shrewdly at each of them.
As a matter of fact,
he continued, sounding suddenly not nearly as drunk as he appeared,
it might be just as well if I didn't know your names. What a man doesn't know, he can't reveal. And you're too well mixed a group to be in stinking Cthulhu Murgos on honest business. Fetch yourself cups. This keg is almost full, and I've got another chilling out back of the tent.
At Silk's gesture, they each took a cup from the heap of cookware, piled beside a well-worn saddle, and joined Yarblek on the carpet near the keg.
I'd pour for you like a proper host,
Yarblek told them,
but I spill too much that way. Dip out your own.
Yarblek's ale was a very dark brown and had a rich, almost fruity flavor.
Interesting taste,
Barak said politely.
My brewer chops dried apples into his vats,
the Nadrak replied.
It smooths out some of the bite.
He turned to Silk.
I thought you didn't like Murgos.
I don't.
What are you doing in Cthulhu Murgos, then?
Silk shrugged. Business.
Whose? Yours or Rodar's?
Silk winked at him.
I thought as much. I wish you luck, then. I'd even offer to help, but I'd probably better keep my nose out of it. Murgos distrust us even more than they distrust you Alorns. Not that I can really blame them. Any Nadrak worth the name would go 10 leagues out of his way for the chance to cut a Murgo's throat.
Your affection for your cousins touches my heart, Silk grinned. In the fall and winter. Yarblek scowled.
Cousins,
he spat.
If it weren't for the Grolims, we'd have exterminated the whole cold-blooded race generations ago.
He dipped out another cup of ale, lifted it, and said,
Confusion to the Murgos. I think we've found something we can drink to together,
Barak said with a broad smile.
Confusion to the Murgos. And may Taur Urgas grow boils on his behind,
Yarblek added. He drank deeply, scooped another cupful of ale from the open keg, and drank again.
I'm a little drunk,
he admitted. We'd never have guessed, Aunt Pole told him.
I like you, girl,
Yarblek grinned at her.
I wish I could afford to buy you. I don't suppose you'd consider running away.
She sighed a mocking little sigh. No, she refused. I'm afraid not. That gives a woman a bad reputation, you know.
Very true,
Yarblek agreed owlishly. He shook his head sadly.
As I was saying, he went on, I'm a little drunk. I probably shouldn't say anything about this, but it's not a good time for Westerners to be in Cthulhu Murgos. Alorns particularly. I've been hearing some strange things lately. Word's been filtering out of Rak Cthul that Murgoland is to be purged of outsiders. Taur Urgas wears the crown and plays king in Rak Goska, but the old Grolim at Rak Cthul has his hand around Taur Urgas's heart. The king of the Murgos knows that one squeeze from Tuchik will leave his throne empty.
We met a Tolnedran a few leagues west of here who said the same sort of thing, Silk said seriously. He told us that merchants from the west were being arrested all over Rakgoska on false charges.
Yarblek nodded.
That's only the first step. Murgos are always predictable. They have so little imagination. Taur Urgas isn't quite ready to offend Ranborun openly by butchering every western merchant in the kingdom, but it's getting closer. Rakgoska's probably a closed city by now. Taur Urgas is free to turn his attention to the outlands. I'd imagine that's why he's coming here.
He's what? Silk's face paled visibly.
I thought you knew, Yarblek told him. Taur Urgas is marching toward the frontier with his army behind him. My guess is that he plans to close the border.
How far away is he? Silk demanded.
I was told that he was seen this morning not 5 leagues from here,
Yarblek said.
What's wrong?
Taur Urgas and I have had some serious fallings out, Silk answered quickly, his face filled with consternation. I can't be here when he arrives. He jumped to his feet.
Where are you going?
Belgrath asked quickly. I've got... I made Yarblek a little too close to Belgrath. Because of course I did.
Where are you going?
Belgrath asked quickly. Someplace safe. I'll catch up with you later. Excuse me. He turned then and bolted out of the tent. A moment later, they heard the pounding of his horse's hooves.
Do you want me to go with him?
Barak asked Belgrath.
You'd never catch him. I wonder what he did to Taur Urgas,
Yarblek mused. He chuckled then.
It must have been something pretty awful, the way the little thief ran out of here.
Silk bolted. Is that the first time we've seen Silk afraid? Or at least showing fear? Is it safe for him to go away from the caravan track? Garion asked, remembering the vultures at their grisly feast beside the trail.
Don't worry about Silk,
Yarblek replied confidently. From a great distance away, a slow thudding sound began to intrude itself. Yarblek's eyes narrowed with hate.
It looks like Silk left just in time, he growled.
The thudding became louder and turned into a hollow, booming sound. Dimly, behind the booming, they could hear a kind of groaning chant of hundreds of voices in a deep minor key. What's that? Dernick asked.
Taur Urgas,
Yarblek answered, and spat. What, on his carpets?
That's the war song of the king of the Murgos.
War? Mandoralin demanded sharply.
Taur Urgas is always at war,
Yarblek replied with heavy contempt.
Even when there isn't anybody to be at war with.
He was sitting at the back of the tent. That would have to be quite the loogie to make it out the front door.
He sleeps in his armor, even in his own palace. It makes him smelly, but all Murgos stink anyway, so it doesn't really make any difference.
Maybe, oh yeah, maybe he has a spittoon.
Maybe I'd better go see what he's up to.
He got heavily to his feet.
Wait here, he told them. This is a Nadrak tent, and there are certain courtesies expected between Angaraks. His soldiers won't come in here, so you'll be safe as long as you stay inside.
He lurched toward the door of the tent, an expression of icy hatred on his face. The chanting and the measured drum beats grew louder. Shrill fifes picked up a discordant, almost jigging accompaniment, and then there was a sudden blaring of deep-throated horns.
What do you think, Belgarath?
Barak rumbled.
This Yarblek seems like a good enough fellow, but he's still an Angarak. One word from him, and we'll have 100 Murgos in here with us.
He's right, Father, Aunt Pole agreed. I know Nadrax well enough to know that Yarblek wasn't nearly as drunk as he pretended to be. Belgarath pursed his lips. Big flash there. What the? Oh, and then another one. 2 in a row. Definitely need to figure that out. I hope it's not a problem with the camera. It's probably a setting thing or something. Belgarath pursed his lips.
Maybe it isn't too good an idea to gamble all that much on the fact that Nadrax despise Murgos, he conceded. We might be doing Yarblek an injustice, but perhaps it would be better just to slip away before Taur Urgas has time to put guards around the whole place anyway. There's no way of knowing how long he's going to stay here, and once he settles in, we might have trouble leaving.
Dernick pulled aside the red carpeting that hung along the back wall, reached down, and tugged out several tent pegs. He lifted the canvas. I think we can crawl out here.
Wasn't there, in one of the earlier books, didn't they, cut a slit in the back of someone's tent to stick out, or to sneak out, and that, upset the person? And weren't we wondering at the time why they didn't just do exactly this? It was something like, the back of the tent is canvas, we can make as many doors as we want. Yeah, right, escaping from Brill at the Great Fair of Erendia. So an especially dickish move, right? I kind of thought so at the time, but... That's funny that now they just oh, right, we could just pull up the tent pegs.
Let's go then,
Belgarath decided. One by one, they rolled out of the tent into the chill wind.
Get the horses,
Belgarath said quietly. He looked around, his eyes narrowing.
That gully over there.
He pointed at a wash opening out just beyond the last row of tents.
If we keep the tents between us and the main caravan track, we should be able to get into it without being seen. Most likely everybody here is going to be watching the arrival of Taur Urgas.
Would the Murgo king know thee, Belgarath? Mandaralan asked.
He might. We've never met, but my description's been noised around in Cthul Murgos for a long time now. It's best not to take any chances.
They led their horses along the back of the tents and gained the cover of the gully without incident.
This wash comes down off the backside of that hill there,
Barak pointed.
If we follow it, we'll be out of sight all the way, and once we get the hill between us and the camp, we'll be able to ride away without being seen. It's almost evening.
Belgarath looked up at the lowering sky.
Yeah, I was wondering about that one too.
My description's been noised around. That is probably the first time I've heard that word used in that way. I think we already filled in that unusual descriptive word use. We've already filled in that space. I feel like these flickerings are coming more and more frequently. Hope I don't have like a memory crash problem or something.
Let's go up a ways and then wait until after dark.
They moved on up the gully until they were behind the shoulder of the hill.
Better keep an eye on things,
Belgrath said. Barak and Garion scrambled up out of the gully and moved at a crouch to the top of the hill, where they lay down behind a scrubby bush.
Here they come,
Barak muttered. You think noised is more disdain than gossip? I feel like the word gossip can be used pretty disdainfully. Gossip seems more purposeful. A steady stream of grim-faced Murgo soldiers marched 8 abreast into the makeshift fair to the cadenced beat. To the cadenced beat of great drums. In their midst, astride a black horse, and under a flapping black banner, rode Taur Urgas. Everybody ready for this? He was a tall man with heavy, sloping shoulders and an angular, merciless face. The thick links of his mail shirt had been dipped in molten red gold, making it almost appear as if he were covered with blood. A thick metal belt encircled his waist, and the scabbard of the sword he wore on his left hip was jewel-encrusted. A pointed steel helmet sat low over his black eyebrows, and the blood-red crown of Thol Murgos was riveted to it. His crown is riveted to his helmet. Yarblek did say he was always at war and slept in his armor. A kind of chainmail hood covered the back and sides of the king's neck and spread out over his shoulders. When he reached the open area directly in front of the square stone supply post, Taur Urgas reined in his horse.
Wine!
He commanded. His voice, carried by the icy wind, seemed startlingly close. Garion squirmed a bit lower under the bush. Edgar Perez, hey, discovering the wizard goose. Nice. So here's the thing. I don't think that sound can be carried by wind. Right? Because sound is like sound waves. It's waves in the air. It's not something that, it's not like a smell. It's not a physical thing. I'm pretty sure sound cannot be carried by wind. Homework assignment. Garion squirmed a bit lower under the bush. The internet says otherwise? The internet says it can be? Alright. So how's Edgar Perez doing? Still working your way through the Stephen King fantasy series whose name is escaping me? Something about kings or something? it can change sound. I don't know if that makes it go further, though. I would imagine that atmospheric conditions could change sound. Anyways, let's see. The Murgo who ran the supply post scurried inside and came back out, carrying a flagon and a metal goblet. Taur Urgas took the goblet, drank, and then slowly closed his big fist around it, crushing it in his grip. Barak snorted with contempt. "What was that about?" Garion whispered.
"Nobody drinks from a cup once Taur Urgas has used it," the red-bearded Cherik replied. "If Anheg behaved like that, his warriors would dunk him in the bay at Valalorn." "Have you the names of all foreigners here?" the king demanded of the Murgo storekeeper, his wind-carried voice distinct in Garion's ears.
Serd is raiding with a party of 1. Hello, Serd. Hello from Serd's library. Hey, Books, Brews, and Brews again. And hello, Serd. How are you doing? We're reading Magician's Gambit by David Eddings. I'm Sleet. I always forget to actually introduce myself. You are everywhere. Nice. We are encountering the King of the Murgos for the first time. He seems like a very pleasant person. No, he doesn't. Ahem.
"Have you the name of all foreigners here?"
the king demanded of the Murgo storekeeper, his wind-carried voice distinct in Garion's ears.
"As you commanded, Dread King."
Dread King. He has a cute... Oh, me. Yes. Yes, I do. I must summon the pup. Which is easy enough to do. Yep, here he comes. Hi, Ben. Oh. This is Benabic. Ben for short. Up here. That's it. Hey, cutie. Oh, big shake. Oh, you can't see him. Oh, he's hiding. Yeah, I'm showing you off. Wag wag? Waggy tail? No? Alright, gonna settle down there? It's a good spot. Dread puppers. Yui, the Japanese Spitz. Sorry, that's it for treats for tonight. You've got had treats twice. He's looking at me like he's betrayed, and away he goes. All right. And how's your evening going, Serd? Cue sad music. Excuse me.
"As you commanded, Dread King,"
the storekeeper replied with an obsequious bow. Obsequious, there's a good word. Volume 1 of current read, and what's the current read? This is volume 3 out of 5 or 10, depending on how you count it. The wife is first. All right.
And what's that about? What kind of genre? I see, I see. Is that, I've read some Chinese, like, light novels, or, like, web novels, I guess. But I'm not sure the terminology. Is Danmei, like manga with pictures, or is it just, like a novel? Alright, so, full novel. Okay, cool. And is it good so far? He, the storekeeper, drew a roll of parchment out of one sleeve and handed it up to his ruler. Taur Urgas unrolled the parchment and glanced at it.
Summon the Nadrak, Yarblek,
He ordered.
Let Yarblek of Garog Nadrak approach.
An officer at the king's side bellowed. Yarblek, his felt overcoat flapping stiffly in the wind, stepped forward.
Our cousin from the north,
Taur Urgas greeted him coldly.
Your Majesty,
Yarblek replied with a slight bow.
It would be well if you departed, Yarblek,
The king told him.
My soldiers have certain orders, and some of them might fail to recognize a fellow Angarak in their eagerness to obey my commands. I cannot guarantee your safety if you remain, and I would be melancholy if something unpleasant befell you.
Yarblek bowed again.
My servants and I will leave at once, Your Majesty. If they are Nadraks, they have our permission to go,
The king said.
All foreigners, however, must remain. You're dismissed, Yarblek. I think we got out of that tent just in time,
Barak muttered. Then a man in a rusty mail shirt, covered with a greasy brown vest, stepped out of the supply post. He was unshaven, but the white of one of his eyes gleamed unwholesomely. Brill! Garion exclaimed. Barak's eyes went flat. Brill bowed to Taur Urgas with an unexpected grace.
Hail, mighty king,
he said. His tone was neutral, carrying neither respect nor fear.
What are you doing here, Cordok?
Taur Urgas demanded coldly.
I'm on my master's business, dread king,
Brill replied. Is that what I was doing for Brill's voice? Sounds a little similar to Relg. Something like that? I'm not sure.
What business would Ktuchik have in a place like this? Something personal, great king,
Brill answered evasively.
I like to keep track of you and the other Dagashi, Cordok. When did you come back to Cthul Murgos? A few months ago, mighty arm of Torak. If I'd known you were interested, I'd have sent word to you. The people my master wants me to deal with know I'm following them, so my movements aren't secret.
Taur Urgas laughed shortly, a sound without any warmth.
You must be getting old, Cordok. Most Dagashi would have finished the business by now.
These are rather special people, Brill shrugged.
It shouldn't take me much longer, however. The game is nearly over. Incidentally, great king, I have a gift for you.
He snapped his fingers sharply, and two of his henchmen came out of the building, dragging a third man between them. There was blood on the front of the captive's tunic, and his head hung down as if he were only semi-conscious. Barak's breath hissed between his teeth. Not explosively, though.
I thought you might like a bit of sport,
Brill suggested.
I'm the king of Cthul Murgos, Kordok,
Taur Urgas replied coldly.
I'm not amused by your attitude, and I'm not in the habit of doing chores for the Dagashi. If you want him dead, kill him yourself.
You're always forgetting your voices, yeah. The ones that I do regularly I can keep track of, but the ones that only crop up a few times in the book.
This would hardly be a chore, Your Majesty,
Brill said with an evil grin.
The man's an old friend of yours.
He reached out, roughly grasped the prisoner's hair, and jerked his head up for the king to see. It was Silk. His face was pale, and a deep cut on one side of his forehead trickled blood down the side of his face. Oops, I almost dropped the book. Grabbing the bingo sheet. Guess what, everyone? Where is it? Where is it? There it is. N1. Head injury. Oh. We're only one off on the first line. Sir, if you want to see our bingo sheet here. Let's see if it'll focus up a little. I need to bring it closer. I really did think that the O column was going to be the most likely, but we just need Garion getting cocky. But that said, we are in Cthul Murgos, and Garion might be a little too sensible to get cocky in Cthul Murgos. And middle bottom, yeah, that's true. What do we need there? We need someone to not believe in magic for that one. So. Farmos didn't see the top line. I and G are not doing very well. And neither is the second line. Yeah, we're getting close a few ways. We barely have an I in that one. Probably didn't count. Which one didn't count? Oh, the Synedra issuing orders. Right. Yeah, that's why we've only got a little circle there. Alright, so Silk's in a bad spot.
Behold the Drasnian spy, Keldar.
Brill smirked.
I make a gift of him to your majesty.
Taur Urgas began to smile then, his eyes lighting with a dreadful pleasure.
Splendid,
he said.
You have the gratitude of your king, Kordok. Your gift is beyond price.
His smile grew broader.
Greetings, Prince Keldar,
he said, almost purring.
I've been waiting for the chance to see you again for a long time now. We have many old scores to settle, don't we?
Silk seemed to stare back at the Murgo King, but Garion could not be sure if he were conscious enough even to comprehend what was happening to him.
"Abide here a bit, Prince of Drasnia,"
Taur Urgas gloated.
"I'll want to give some special thought to your final entertainment, and I'll want to be sure you're fully awake to appreciate it. You deserve something exquisite, I think, probably lingering, and I certainly wouldn't want to disappoint you by rushing into it."
That's the end of chapter 21. What time is it? It's just after 8 o'clock my time. What do we think? Let's take a look. How long's chapter 22? Oh, it's not very long. Goes from 240 to 248. So it's like 7.5 pages. Everybody up for 7.5 pages? Yeah? Alright, let's do it. Chapter 22. We're on page 240. Barak and Garion slid back down into the gully with the gravel rattling down the steep bank around them. Don't make too much noise. The wind might carry it.
"They've got Silk,"
Barak reported quietly.
"Brill's there. It looks as if he and his men caught Silk while he was trying to leave. They turned him over to Taur Urgas."
Belgarath stood up slowly, a sick look on his face.
"Is he?"
He broke off.
"No,"
Barak answered.
"He's still alive. It looks as if they roughed him up a little, but he seems to be all right."
Belgarath let out a long, slow breath.
"That's something, anyway." "Taur Urgas seemed to know him,"
Barak continued.
"It sounded as if Silk had done something that offended the king pretty seriously, and Taur Urgas looks like the kind of man who holds grudges."
Are they holding him someplace where we can get to him? Dernick asked. We couldn't tell, Garion answered. They all talked for a while, and then several soldiers took him around behind that building down there. We couldn't see where they took him from there.
"The Murgo who runs the place said something about a pit,"
Barak added. We have to do something, Father, Aunt Pole said.
"I know, Pole. We'll come up with something."
He turned to Barak again.
"How many soldiers did Taur Urgas bring with him?" "A couple of regiments, at least. They're all over the place down there."
We can translocate him, Father, Aunt Pole suggested.
"That's a long way to lift something, Pole,"
he objected.
"Besides, we'd have to know exactly where he's being held."
I'll find that out. She reached up to unfasten her cloak.
"Better wait until after dark," he told her. "There aren't many owls in Cthul Murgos, and you'd attract attention in the daylight." "Did Taur Urgas have any Grolims with him?" he asked Garion.
I think I saw a couple.
"That's going to complicate things. Translocation makes an awful noise. We'll have Taur Urgas right on our heels when we leave."
Do you have any other ideas, Father? Aunt Pole asked.
"Let me work on it,"
he replied.
"At any rate, we can't do anything until it gets dark."
A low whistle came from some distance down the gully.
"Who's that?"
Barak's hand went to his sword.
"Oh, Alorns!"
It was a hoarse whisper. Methinks it is the Nadrak Yarblek, Mandaralin said.
"How did he know we're here?"
Barak demanded. There was the crunching sound of footsteps in the gravel, and Yarblek came around a bend in the gully. His fur cap was low over his face, and the collar of his felt overcoat was pulled up around his ears.
There you are,
he said, sounding relieved.
Are you alone?
Barak's voice was heavy with suspicion.
Of course I'm alone,
Yarblek snorted.
I told my servants to go on ahead. You certainly left in a hurry. We didn't feel like staying to greet Taur Urgas,
Barak replied. The Sharkies were saying, you were in the tent, the pegs were pulled up at the back, and there was a ravine back there. Let's see what Yarblek says.
It's probably just as well. I'd have had a great deal of trouble getting you out of that mess back there. The Murgo soldiers inspected every one of my people to be sure they were all Nadraks before they'd let me leave. Taur Urgas has silk. We know,
Barak said.
How did you find us? You left the pegs pulled up at the back of my tent, and this hill's the closest cover on this side of the fair. I guessed which way you'd go, and you left a track here and there to confirm it.
The Nadrak's coarse face was serious, and he showed no signs of his extended bout at the ale barrel.
We're going to have to get you out of here,
he said.
Taur Urgas will be putting out patrols soon, and you're almost in his lap.
We must rescue our companion first, Mandaralan told him.
Silk? You'd better forget that. I'm afraid my old friend has switched his last pair of dice.
He sighed.
I liked him, too.
He's not dead, is he? Dernick's voice was almost sick.
Not yet,
Yarblek replied.
But Taur Urgas plans to correct that when the sun comes up in the morning. I couldn't even get close enough to that pit to drop a dagger to him so he could open a vein. I'm afraid his last morning's going to be a bad one. Why are you trying to help us?
Barak asked bluntly. You'll have to excuse him, Yarblek, Aunt Pole said. He's not familiar with Nadrak customs. She turned to Barak. He invited you into his tent and offered you his ale. That makes you the same as his brother until sunrise tomorrow. Yarblek smiled briefly at her.
You seem to know us quite well, girl, he observed. I never got to see you dance, did I?
Perhaps another time, she replied.
Perhaps so.
He squatted and pulled a curved dagger from beneath his overcoat. He smoothed the patch of sand with his other hand and began sketching rapidly with his dagger point.
The Murgos are going to watch me, he said, so I can't add half a dozen or so more people to my party without having them all over me. I think the best thing would be for you to wait here until dark. I'll move out to the east and stop a league or so on up the caravan track. As soon as it gets dark, you slip around and catch up with me. We'll work out something after that. Why did Taur Urgas tell you to leave?
Barak asked him. Yarblek looked grim.
There's going to be a large accident tomorrow.
There's going to be.
Taur Urgas will immediately send an apology to Ranboroon. Something about inexperienced troops chasing a band of brigands and mistaking honest merchants for bandits. He'll offer to pay reparation, and things will all be smoothed over. Pay is a magic word when you're dealing with Tolnedrans. He's going to massacre the whole camp?
Barak sounded stunned.
That's his plan. He wants to clean all the Westerners out of Cthul Murgos, and he seems to think that a few such accidents will do the job for him.
starting to rain here again. Some big drops. Relg had been standing to one side, his large eyes lost in thought. Suddenly, he stepped across the gully to where Yarblek's sketch was. Sounds almost like hail. It might. I don't think it is hail, but there's really big raindrops. He smoothed it out of the sand. You can hear it coming through. Oh yeah, I can see my little volume meter bouncing when I'm not talking. You bet it is. I can't see well enough to tell if there's any actual solidity there. Weird. So, Relg smoothed it out of the sand.
Can you show me exactly where this pit in which they're holding our friend is located?
He asked.
It won't do you any good,
Yarblek told him.
It's guarded by a dozen men. Silk's got quite a reputation, and Taur Urgas doesn't want him to get away. Just show me,
Relg insisted.
Jeez. I'm going to take a quick look. I want to see if it's sailing.
BRB.
Doesn't look like it. No, I think it's just big heavy raindrops. I think it's just big heavy raindrops.
Yarblek shrugged.
We're here on the north side.
He roughed in the fare and the caravan route.
The supply station is here.
He pointed with his dagger.
The pit's just beyond it at the base of that big hill on the south side. What kind of walls does it have? Solid stone. Is it a natural fissure in the rock, or has it been dug out? What difference does it make? I need to know. I didn't see any tool marks,
Yarblek replied.
And the opening at the top is irregular. It's probably just a natural hole.
Relg nodded.
And the hill behind it, is it rock or dirt? Mostly rock. All of stinking Taur Urgas is mostly rock.
Relg stood up.
Thank you,
he said politely.
You're not going to be able to tunnel through to him if that's what you're thinking,
Yarblek said, also standing and brushing the sand off the skirts of his overcoat.
You don't have time.
Our D&D group has a kind of a running joke that goes, how close to the equator are we? Because that's a question that got asked in one session.
Belgarath's eyes were narrowed with thought.
Thanks, Yarblek, he said. You've been a good friend. Anything to irritate the Urgas, the Nadrak said. I wish I could do something for Silk. Don't give up on him yet. There isn't much hope, I'm afraid. I'd better be going. My people will wander off if I'm not there to watch them. Yarblek,
Barak said, holding out his hand.
Someday we'll have to get together and finish getting drunk.
Yarblek grinned at him and shook his hand. Then he turned and caught Aunt Pole in a rough embrace.
If you ever get bored with these Alorns, girl, my tent flap is always open to you.
I'll keep that in mind, Yarblek, she replied demurely.
Luck,
Yarblek told them.
I'll wait for you until midnight.
Then he turned and strode off down the gully.
That's a good man there,
Barak said.
I think I could actually get to like him.
We must make plans for Prince Keldar's rescue, Mandaralan declared, beginning to take his armor out of the pack strapped to one of the horses. All else failing, we must of necessity resort to main force. Does that count? I don't know if that counts. Because that's Mandaralan stating it as like a last resort.
You're backsliding again, Mandaralan,
Barak said.
That's already been taken care of,
Belgarath told them. Barak and Mandaralan stared at him.
Put your armor away, Mandaralan,
The old man instructed the knight.
You're not going to need it. Who's going to get Silk out of there?
Barak demanded.
I am,
Relg answered quietly.
How much longer is it going to be before it gets dark? About an hour. Why? I'll need some time to prepare myself.
Have you got a plan? Dernick asked. Relg shrugged.
There isn't any need. We'll just circle around until we're behind that hill on the other side of the encampment. I'll go get our friend, and then we can leave. Just like that?
Barak asked.
More or less. Please excuse me.
Relg started to turn away.
Wait a minute. Shouldn't Mandaralan and I go with you? You wouldn't be able to follow me,
Relg told him. He walked up the gully a short distance. After a moment, they could hear him muttering his prayers.
Does he think he can pray him out of that pit?
Barak sounded disgusted.
No,
Belgarath replied.
He's going to go through the hill and carry Silk back out. That's why he was asking Yarblek all those questions. He's going to what? You saw what he did at Prolgu when he stuck his arm into the wall. Well, yes, but it's quite easy for him, Barak. What about Silk? How's he going to pull him through the rock? I don't really know. He seems quite sure he can do it, though. If it doesn't work, Taur Urgas is going to have Silk roasting over a slow fire first thing tomorrow morning. You know that, don't you?
Belgarath nodded somberly. Barak shook his head.
It's unnatural,
he grumbled.
Don't let it upset you so much,
Belgarath advised. The light began to fade, and Relg continued to pray, his voice rising and falling in formal cadences. When it was fully dark, he came back to where the others waited. I'm ready, he said quietly. We can leave now. We'll circle to the west, Belgarath told them. We'll lead the horses and stay under cover as much as we can. It will take us a couple hours, Dernick said. That's all right. It will give the soldiers time to settle down. Pull, see what the Grolim's Garion are up to. She nodded, and Garion felt the gentle push of her probing mind. It's all right, Father, she stated after a few moments. They're preoccupied. Taur Urgas has them conducting services for him. Let's go, then, the old man said. They moved carefully down the gully, leading the horses. The night was murky, and the wind bit at them as they came out from between the protecting gravel banks. The plain to the east of the fair was dotted with 100 fires, whipping in the wind, and marking the vast encampment of the army of Taur Urgas. Relg grunted and covered his eyes with his hands. "What's wrong?" Garion asked him.
"They're fires," Relg said. "They stab at my eyes."
"Try not to look at them."
"My God has laid a hard burden on me, Belgarion."
Relg sniffed and wiped at his nose with his sleeve.
"I'm not meant to be out in the open like this."
"You'd better have Aunt Pole give you something for that cold. It will taste awful, but you'll feel better after you drink it."
"Perhaps,"
Relg said, still shielding his eyes from the dim flicker of the Murgo watchfires. Yeah, if we hadn't already had the angst square, everything since they left the caves of the Ulgos with Relg would have thoroughly filled that in.
"Perhaps,"
Relg said, still shielding his eyes from the dim flicker of the Murgo watchfires. Just don't look at it, right? Oh, and Serd, thank you for the follow if you're still here. I didn't see that you'd followed before. The hill on the south side of the fair was a low outcropping of granite. Although aeons of constant wind had covered it for the most part with a thick layer of blown sand and dirt, the rock itself lay solid beneath its covering mantle. They stopped behind it, and Relg began carefully to brush the dirt from a sloping granite face.
"Wouldn't it be closer if you started over there?"
Barak asked quietly.
"Too much dirt,"
Relg replied.
"Dirt or rock? What's the difference?" "A great difference. You wouldn't understand."
He leaned forward and put his tongue to the granite face, seeming actually to taste the rock.
"This is going to take a while,"
he said. He drew himself up, began to pray, and slowly pushed himself directly into the rock. Barak shuddered and quickly averted his eyes. "What ails thee, my lord?" Mandaralin asked.
"It makes me cold all over just watching that,"
Barak replied. "Our new friend is perhaps not the best of companions," Mandaralin said. "But if his gift succeeds in freeing Prince Keldar, I will embrace him gladly and call him brother." Good night, Serd. Hopefully we'll see you around. Thanks for joining.
"If it takes him very long, we're going to be awfully close to this spot when morning comes and Taur Urgas finds out that Silk's gone,"
Barak mentioned. I see.
"We'll just have to wait and see what happens,"
Belgarath told him. The night dragged by interminably. The wind moaned and whistled around the rocks on the flanks of the stony hill, and the sparse thorn bushes rustled stiffly. They waited. A growing fear oppressed Garion as the hours passed. More and more he became convinced that they had lost Relg as well as Silk. He felt that same sick emptiness he had felt when it had been necessary to leave the wounded Leldorin behind back in Arendia. He realized, feeling a bit guilty about it, that he hadn't thought about Leldorin in months. He began to wonder how well the young hothead had recovered from his wound, or even if he had recovered. His thoughts grew bleaker as the minutes crawled. Then, with no warning, with not even a sound, Relg stepped out of the rock face he had entered hours before. Astride his broad back, and clinging desperately to him, was Silk. The rat-faced little man's eyes were wide with horror, and his hair seemed to be actually standing on end. They all crowded around the two, trying to keep their jubilation quiet, conscious of the fact that they were virtually on top of an army of Murgos.
"I'm sorry it took so long,"
Relg said, jerking his shoulders uncomfortably until Silk finally slid off his back.
"There's a different kind of rock in the middle of the hill. I had to make certain adjustments."
Silk stood, gasping and shuddering uncontrollably. Finally, he turned on Relg. "Don't ever do that to me again," he blurted. "Not ever!"
"What's the trouble?"
Barak asked. "I don't want to talk about it." "I had feared we had lost thee, my friend," Mandaralin said, grasping Silk's hand.
"How did Brill catch you?"
Barak asked. "I was careless. I didn't expect him to be here. His men threw a net over me as I was galloping through a ravine. My horse fell and broke his neck."
"Hatar's not going to like that."
"I'll cut the price of that horse out of Brill's skin. Someplace close to the bone, I think."
"Why does Taur Urgas hate you so much?"
Barak asked curiously. "I was in Rakgoska a few years ago. A Tolnedran agent made a few false charges against me. I never found out exactly why. Taur Urgas sent some soldiers out to arrest me. I didn't particularly feel like being arrested, so I argued with the soldiers a bit. Several of them died during the argument. Those things happen once in a while. Unfortunately, one of the casualties was Taur Urgas's oldest son. The king of the Murgos took it personally. He's very narrow-minded sometimes." Barak grinned.
"He'll be terribly disappointed in the morning when he finds out you've left."
"I know," Silk replied. "He'll probably take this part of Cthul Murgos apart stone by stone, trying to find me."
"I think it's time we left,"
Belgarath agreed. "I thought you'd never get around to that," Silk said. Yeah. Well, that's the end of chapter 22. We're getting pretty close to the end of this book. Not a lot left to go. We're on page 249 out of 305, I think. Yep, 305. So we've got like 56 pages to go. Silk was saved much faster than you thought. Yeah, within the same chapter. So, Relg can carry someone else through the rock. And Silk did not appreciate that. So I suppose it means he is still alive, so hopefully he is willing to make that trade. Silk has not been a very good D&D rogue recently. And this time, it wasn't Garion that got kidnapped. Thought that would be a few chapter ordeal. Yeah, that's a good point. If you are squeezing your molecules between solid rock,
that probably means your lungs are pretty occupied with things other than air. It said he slid off Relg gasping and shaking. I don't think the gasping was... I think it was more of a fear thing. I'm guessing that whatever Relg does keeps them alive in the process because, I mean, it was a several-hour process. So, most people don't hold their breath that long. And he did go through an entire hill. Yeah, I don't know. I'm guessing it's just one of those chalk it up to magic sort of things. Relg did something unexpected, and Silk got kidnapped. And Silk was uncomfortable with world leaders. But, Garion just hasn't really had... Ooh, wait, hang on. Did this count as Garion eavesdropping? Or was this more of a spying sort of thing? Because he did crawl to the top of the hill and listen in on the conversation. Everyone think that counts? It doesn't specify that he does it alone. Alright, I think this counts. It was, you know, survival-based eavesdropping, but it was eavesdropping with intent. I think that counts. Which actually gives us another possible finishing line if Belgarath is a dirty old man at some point. We had Yarblek being a dirty old man. But we have not had Belgarath having an opportunity for a while. It really only gets us the one spot line closer, though, because this one is... Was it the Britannia? What is it? The Britannia mine? The one in, like, Squamish? Is that right? I'm drawing a blank on the name. Worked there on the Flash. And went there for Halloween one year. Oh dear. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna go finish my dinner, I think, and then hopefully get sleepy. Definitely not vetted for tourism. Okay, so not the Britannia mine. Or is that right? Is that the right name? Royal Britannia mine? I'm pretty sure I've been under, like, in at least one other mine before, but when I was quite young, and I don't remember which one. But let's see. The one up in, like, Squamish. I feel like the name isn't quite right. Let me check. Maybe it is. Yeah, Britannia Mine and Museum. Sea to Sky Highway on Howe Sound. I guess it's like part of the way to Squamish, but it's not fully there. Yours was more in the interior, but it was in BC, huh? BC is big. BC. Oh, there goes the dishwasher singing its song. All right, well, I think that Bear is still streaming. Yeah, he is. So let's go say hi to Bear. But I hope everyone has a lovely evening and rest of the week. I'm pretty sure I'll be here same time Friday, and we can continue on into Taur Urgas. So yeah, go say hi to Bear, and have a great evening. Wish me luck getting to sleep tonight. Okay, bye. Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining again. Away I go.